right. Hello and good afternoon. Good morning to some of our listeners. My name is Allie Snell. I'm the Marketing Outreach and Recruitment Director for AmeriCorps VISTA and a proud AmeriCorps VISTA alum. And I am so excited to talk to you all today about this amazing program. I see that we had a little prompt at the beginning, and one of the questions that many of you were answering while we were waiting is, what intrigues you about AmeriCorps VISTA? And I've been sitting here watching the chat going, and I've been seeing some amazing things. We have folks who really want to make a difference in their community. They want to help others. They are interested in gaining the marketable skills that a lot of folks get in VISTA. They want to empower communities, and they want to make local solutions work. A lot of people talk about their values, their hopes and their dreams for either their community or here in our greater community here in the U.S. And we're just seeing a lot of really great positive energy. And one of the good things I can tell you all is a lot of what you're putting out here, these are opportunities that are indeed available in the AmeriCorps VISTA experience. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and we have a couple of currently serving AmeriCorps VISTA members and an alum in the room with me here who are going to tell you about their experience. So stay tuned. We're going to keep going, and we'll get to the logistics on the next slide. So we'll go right ahead with the logistics of today's call.
Well, thanks very much, Allie, and you all welcome to the webinar. You can listen to the audio for today's webinar in a few different ways. It's being broadcast both by phone and online, so you can stream the audio through your computer by clicking the Communicate menu at the top of the screen and click and then select Audio Broadcast. And if the audio cuts out for you during the session, maybe you're having connectivity issues, just go back to the Communicate menu and you can restart the audio broadcast again. If you're still having trouble with the audio broadcast, or if you'd like to participate in the verbal Q&A that we'll have at the end of the webinar, just call in through the phone number, and you'll see that listed on this slide and at the bottom of each slide of the presentation. We are also providing live closed captioning, so to view the live captioning, just open the media viewer panel in the bottom right corner of the screen. And finally, as we go along in today's webinar, you all may have questions. Feel free at any time to enter your questions in the Q&A panel. Please address them to all panelists, and we'll have an open Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Also, please feel free to keep sharing your comments and thoughts in the chat. The difference between the chat and the Q&A is that if you enter something in the chat and address it to all participants, everyone who's joining us on the webinar today will be able to see it. If you enter a question in Q&A, only the panelists will see that. So with that, let me turn it back over to Allie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. So once again, folks, there are lots of ways to communicate and collaborate today. Definitely use the chat function. We are going to take live phone calls for folks who've called in, and remember the call-in number will be at the bottom of every slide, along with the passcode you'll have to enter. So once we hear from our panelists here, we'll have an opportunity to hear directly from you. Otherwise, we have two of our amazing AmeriCorps VISTA alums who are Ann and Khadijah, and they are taking a look at the chat box and the Q&A, and they're addressing questions as we go. So we'll be here. We're here to answer your questions, and we're here to inform you about this amazing opportunity. So I want to start with some numbers. This is a really large one, and this is really the problem that we're always looking at here in AmeriCorps VISTA. According to recent census data, about 46.7 million people live in poverty in the U.S. What does this mean? This means that they live below a certain income threshold. Of these 46.7 million folks, about 1 in 5 children live in poverty in the United States. We know that poverty takes many forms, and that poverty looks different today than it did back in the 1960s when VISTA first started. Poverty can mean lack of access to the most basic services like food and clean water, but for a lot of Americans, poverty can also be evident in, say, the parent who works 3 jobs and still struggles to pay rent. Poverty can be evident in the fact that for certain kids, it's harder for them to get into higher education than others. Poverty is evident in all pockets and corners of this country, and that's where we come in. With AmeriCorps VISTA, we have over 8,000 people serving in more than 3,000 communities across the U.S., making a difference where it matters most, at the local level. One of the things that intrigued me about AmeriCorps VISTA and why I wanted to join after I graduated college over 15 years ago was the fact that this isn't just an opportunity to sort of skim the surface. You are embedded in a community, whether that's across the U.S. from where you grew up or right in your backyard, like some of our members will hear from today, and you're learning and doing and acting and being with people who are making a difference every day, and you're elevating the experiences and the needs of the community around you. So without further ado, we'll get into a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program, because I know many of you probably have questions about how this really works. So let's take it back to 1965. We have a great photo here of two former VISTA members working in an inner-city program. VISTA was founded as VISTA in 1965 by then President Johnson, and VISTA actually is an acronym that stands for Volunteers in Service to America. We became AmeriCorps VISTA in 1994 when President Clinton created AmeriCorps and established the federal agency that oversees all AmeriCorps programs, known as the Corporation for National and Community Service. So hopefully you guys got all that. That's a lot of different terms, but at its essence, VISTA really was the first domestic poverty-focused service program in the United States. We have a really rich legacy. Back when the Peace Corps was created in 1961, President Kennedy was looking for a way to bring anti-poverty programming to all corners of the U.S. that modeled the same model as the Peace Corps, putting Americans in communities where they're working to advance local solutions. Since our founding in 1965, over 220,000 Americans have served as AmeriCorps VISTA members. And, you know, lastly, one of the greatest aspects, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, of the VISTA program is that local organizations and nonprofit organizations request technical assistance in the form of an AmeriCorps VISTA member to expand services or to help create services that serve marginalized and low-income communities. So VISTA members aren't just there to serve and do the work, but to also work behind the scenes and advance the needs and solutions of the community. That in and of itself is why the VISTA program is sustainable and why we've seen amazing sustained efforts over the decades. So what do AmeriCorps VISTA members do? Well, service is generally 1 year, and you're put within an organization or a state, municipal, or tribal government agency. So we generally work to advance, as I said, local and nonprofit-based programs and solutions to poverty. We also have a shorter-term service opportunity called Summer Associates, which I do want to mention here. While the majority of our VISTA members serve a full year term, we do have 8, 9, or 10-week opportunities to serve during the summer, so usually between the months of June and August, that work directly on specific programs that directly impact vulnerable communities. So this would be working on a summer feeding program, or we're doing some summer literacy or addressing summer school loss. So we do have the Summer Associates program. It's a little-known program, but I'm going to talk, for the majority of today's conversation, we're going to talk about the standard VISTA program because that's really what most people serve in. One of the amazing things about VISTA is that you gain leadership experience while helping to expand initiatives to directly deal with poverty at the grassroots level. This is never a top-down approach. We don't go into a community with a specific agenda. It's all driven first and foremost by community need. The other beautiful thing about AmeriCorps VISTA is you can serve virtually anywhere in the United States and U.S. territories such as Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have, as I mentioned, over 3,000 service opportunities across the U.S. You can apply to choose at a project of your choice, whether you are interested in going to a specific location, or perhaps you're very interested in a specific focus area, or working with a nonprofit that you know of. So when you do apply, you can apply to the project of your choice. For a lot of people, they might have interest in, say, working in sustainable community economic development. You can search by keyword, you can search by location, you can search by focus area. Maybe you want to work with veterans. Maybe you want to work specifically with children. All of these are options with AmeriCorps VISTA. Or maybe, once again, you want to work with a big national organization like Habitat for Humanity. They also have AmeriCorps VISTA assistance, helping them to expand programs to the most needy and vulnerable communities. And of course, there are many benefits to VISTA service, which I'm going to go through in just a minute, but for a lot of folks who are maybe recently out of college, we know the reality of the situation. Student debt is real, and it's, oftentimes people have to make a choice between college or getting a job, more education or getting a job. A lot of times people think that service isn't an opportunity for them because they simply cannot bring it into their experience. They have to find work, they have to pay student loans. The nice thing is while you serve with VISTA, many of our federal student loans are deferrable during your VISTA service, and you are also eligible to receive an education award upon completion of your service to be put towards qualified educational expenses. Before we talk a little bit more about the benefits, just to give you, I have a list here of just some of the types of jobs that VISTA members work on. One is a VISTA member who helps Habitat for Humanity of the East Bay in Oakland, California, build a social media presence to advance their mission and donor base. Another opportunity is working with a local after-school program to design workshops and educate communities on healthy, locally grown food and help create school gardens to supplement nutritional needs. Another one would be to help a big national robotics competition organization write grant proposals to help support technology centers in under-resourced schools and communities. When I was a VISTA member, I actually served with the Eastern Agency of the Navajo Nation, and I helped them develop a comprehensive economic development plan, as well as implement some after-school activities for children who were on a local tribal boarding school. So the opportunities to serve and the interest areas are truly as diverse as the VISTA members themselves. All right, so let's talk about the benefits. As I stated, AmeriCorps VISTA is absolutely a volunteer opportunity. It's a volunteer experience. It's service. But we have many benefits to the service. I can honestly attest, and I think some of our members here can say that during my service year, and once again, I did my VISTA service immediately after graduating college, I gained more experience and responsibility than I ever thought possible for a recent college grad. But in addition to that, as you're volunteering for a year, you do receive a modest biweekly living allowance that covers basic expenses, and that is something that we do examine every year to make sure that we're able to provide our members with the best possible support. If you choose to relocate for your service, so meaning if you go more than 50 miles from where your home is, you will also receive relocation allowance and a settling in allowance to help you with those expenses. I talked about educational expenses earlier, and this is a big one. By the end of your service, if you successfully complete a year, you have two options for what we call the end of service award. You can either take an Eli Siegel Education Award, which currently is valued at $5,815, that will help pay off student loans, or you could put towards more schooling, or you can choose as an alternative to the Education Award, you can choose a cash stipend, which is currently valued at $1,500. We also have a health care benefit where we try to reimburse you for most medical expenses, as well as certain dental and vision expenses. And then during service, if you have children that are under the age of 13, you might be eligible to receive a child care stipend, up to $400 a month for child care. And of course, throughout your service, as I mentioned, it's an amazing professional development opportunity. All AmeriCorps VISTA members start their service with either an in-person or a virtual, what we call pre-service orientation, which is a big professional development orientation. And depending on where you're serving and what you're doing, you might have opportunities throughout your service year. And finally, if you're interested in serving, if you're looking for a career afterwards, number one, you're going to join a very amazing, diverse alumni cohort of over 200,000 people across the U.S. in all sectors of society that will see the VISTA name and know what you have done. But in addition to that, AmeriCorps VISTA is the only AmeriCorps program that offers what's called non-competitive eligibility. NCE is a special hiring path specifically just for either returned Peace Corps volunteers or former AmeriCorps VISTA members, which allows easier access to federal jobs. It gives you a special hiring preference for any federal jobs that are out there. This is a really great opportunity because not only do you have special hiring preference, but it also counts towards your retirement should you choose to become a career federal employee. I can't stress the NCE benefit enough. I absolutely took advantage of that after my VISTA year, and it was one of the best things I could do. I was able to get a job working in the federal government, and I was able to continue to make a difference in my community where I served. So before we hear from our amazing VISTA members, I just want to get to a few more questions about the application. A lot of you here, we have some folks who are alums who are on this presentation, and we have some folks who are really, most of you though I think are thinking about joining. Just the basics of eligibility. You must be at least 18 years old, but there is absolutely no upper age limit. I did see a number of questions about how many folks we have serving over the age of 50, and I think at current count, it's about 5% of our volunteers, but another 5 to 7% are between the ages of 30 and 50. So we do have folks who serve at all different phases in their lives and in their careers. You must pass a criminal background check. And of course, AmeriCorps VISTA service is open to all U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, lawful permanent residents, and persons legally residing in a state. So those are the basic eligibility criteria, pretty open and available to most Americans. And really, the application it does take time, but I will say the average application time from the time you complete and submit an application till the time you start your VISTA service is about 3 to 4 months. I will say we currently have we still have hundreds of opportunities available starting in July and August. So if you're still sitting on the fence thinking like, you know, I don't know what I want to do, you know, maybe this is something for me, but you don't want to necessarily wait 6 or 8 months to find out, there are opportunities that are still hiring for the next couple of months. So we still have some great openings. That being said, VISTA projects are available year-round, but the majority of VISTA projects start sometime towards the end of the summer and early fall, so just keep that in mind. But we do have projects that start any month of the year. So the first thing you have to do is go to myamericorps.gov, and that's right here on this website, myamericorps.gov, and that's where you can actually search all the opportunities. You'll have to look under AmeriCorps VISTA for all the opportunities that are right for you. And then once you have found those opportunities, you apply directly to the opportunity itself. You'll have to create a profile and an application within our system, which can take a bit of time, but you can apply to up to 10 projects at any given time. So my advice is always, you know, find at least 3 that you think are interesting and apply to them and see what happens. If you're selected by a project, you'll be contacted immediately from the organization for an interview, usually within a few weeks of applying. After the interview, if you're selected, they'll set you up for that pre-service orientation date, and that'll be the day when you technically begin your service. And that, in a nutshell, is how you apply. And before I turn it over to our amazing VISTA members, I just want to say this is a great opportunity, and we have so many different needs, and there's so many different skill sets that we're looking for to fit our over 2,000 vacancies that we have open just today. I just went to our portal today, to myamericorps.gov, and we have over 2,000 VISTA vacancies. However, there are certain characteristics that we always look for in general in potential VISTA members, and those are the things I've listed here. Obviously, someone who's committed to serve, someone who's culturally agile and willing to work with people across differences, someone who's open-minded. Flexibility is really important. Creativity. Poverty is a deeply entrenched and embedded issue that affects almost everybody in some way, shape, or form. We need people who have creative solutions. And in addition to that, being willing to work with others, so collaborative, and willingness to learn and to know, you know, you might not have all the answers. That's okay. You're here to learn and work and gain just as much from this experience as you will give. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Maya Jefferson, who currently is an AmeriCorps VISTA leader serving here in her hometown of Washington, D.C.
Hello, everyone. Like she said, my name is Maya. I serve with an organization called Fair Chance, and we offer capacity building training to community-based nonprofits in D.C. That specifically serve children and youth in poverty. And Fair Chance is an intermediary site with VISTA, so what that means is we host VISTAs as well as place VISTAs with nonprofits who have gone through Fair Chance's training. Fair Chance has served over 100 nonprofits in DC, which is why I chose to work with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my accomplishments and what I'm really proud of. Primarily, it's juggling my two top responsibilities, which is VISTA recruitment through Fair Chance and coordinating Fair Chance events while also completing grant applications. I do all of this with the support of the Director of Development and all the other staff at Fair Chance. There's never really a time where I feel like I'm under-supported, which I completely appreciate. Another one of my accomplishments is that I got to participate in a staff retreat where we revamped our values. And in that retreat, we included and highlighted equity as a Fair Chance value and also community engagement, making sure that we're involving the community in our decisions. One of the hardest things that I've had to deal with in my service was grant writing, learning how to write super concise grant applications and aligning the fundraising team's description of what Fair Chance does with what the actual program team says that we do. And I've learned that it's a very good skill that future employers really like. Another thing that was hard for me is I served as an AmeriCorps member with City Year, which is similar to Teach for America, but we kind of more so mentor students as opposed to leading the class. And that was direct service where I was with my kids every day, and VISTA focuses on capacity building. So I was switching to working on the ground with my kids to being at an organization where basically I was helping run the systems that affected my kids. So I basically learned that I had to kind of take a step back and not be so attached to the idea of, you know, having to or being able to work with my kids and just taking in the idea that I was affecting them and helping them in a larger way with Fair Chance. And for anyone who is considering VISTA, this is the last thing that I will be touching on is that similar to what Ali said, this work is for committed, hardworking people. You need to determine what the value of your service is for you beyond money because you don't get a lot of it. And it's very rewarding work. For me at Fair Chance, I get to do site visits to the nonprofits that go through our training that serve so many kids in the DC area that I care about and are growing up in situations that I grew up in. Another tidbit of advice is when you get into VISTA service, make sure you network your butt off. It is very useful when you are finished with your service year and are looking for jobs after serving, as well as if you are placed at an organization that is not part of a community that you grew up in, take time to learn about that community. Make sure that you're not stepping into the community thinking that you can solve all their problems. Most of the time, communities know their problems and mostly know how to solve them. So when you first start serving, just listen a lot. And those are all my advice items. Yep.
Thank you so much, Maya. Very, very wise words, especially about the feedback from the community. Mm-hmm. So Maya served here in her hometown, and I think, you know, we see it's about closer to an even split of VISTA members who serve either where they grew up versus in a different community. Mm-hmm. And so the advice of you're here to learn and to see where you can be of best help is the best advice that you could give anyone, I think, going into a new community and a new environment. So thank you so much, Maya, for sharing your story. All right, so we're going to take it over to our next panelist, and we'll have more. If you do have questions specifically for Maya, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and if we have time at the end, we can just have sort of an open session where our panelists can talk a little bit and answer specific questions you might have. So I want to take it over to our next member who's currently serving, Mr. Mike Presendieu. You're a current AmeriCorps VISTA member here in DC. You're originally from New York City by way of Haiti, and you serve with the Maya Angelou Public Charter School. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, your service, and what you want to share today.
Hello, this is Mike Presendieu. Well, I currently work with Maya Angelou of the Sea Forever organization foundation. It's a small foundation that runs the Maya Angelou Public Charter School. It's a school located in Southeast DC, and it serves a lot of kids in underprivileged areas and in need of having a good education that can further their future and career later in life. Well, currently I am the family outreach and community engagement. So half of my job requires me to reach out to their family members and try to get them involved in their kids' education. And I reach out to the community by way of partnership and trying to get them more involved in the school. One of the things I'm most proud of is since I started my year, about 3 months ago, I've been working with reaching out cold calling organizations that are doing that can help us establish a community festival that we're having for the community on June 10th. So half of the time I'm cold calling and reaching out to local healthcare services and telling them about our community and the issues that the problems that are facing our community, and seeing how people really care and getting involved and having. I successfully managed to have to create 3 new partnerships, so that was very good to see. And I think one of the hardest part of my current year of serving is a lot of the time working in the high school with a lot of kids that are in need of help. Knowing that I can't help everyone, and there are some kids who on a day where you had a good conversation with kids yesterday, and the next day they don't show up to school, and the next month they're not here or they drop out, so that's kind of hard to deal with. But besides that, you learn to bounce back because you can see the difference you make in other kids' life who maybe did not show up. We did not used to show up to school every day, and then one day they show up like yesterday, and the one kid was like, "I'm so happy you're here, and when I go to school, I know that you're gonna be here, and I'm gonna have time to talk to you, so I'm more inspired to wake up every day and come to school." And it's really nice to hear that you're making such a big difference in someone's life just by being at the school and being a voice, someone's being a new voice in their life, or even someone who can just sit there and listen to their problems. And not even give them advice. So sometimes you just want to have somebody to listen to. And I guess I wanted to talk a lot. When I was reading the chat section, I saw a lot of people mention that there is a first-generation college graduates who are interested in the program, and I just wanted to highlight that question. Yes, I'm also a first-generation college graduate, and one of the reasons why I was doing this program is because I wanted to give back to in the community to people that need it, because once when I was in high school, I remember I needed to be inspired, and there are people that inspired me to be able to go to college and get a college degree, and I wanted to give back and be that person in somebody else's life, and knowing also that there is a lack of Black males that are teaching in the community, their own community, and the lack of that. I wanted to be a source of inspiration for other kids, and I'm not saying I'm inspiring at all, but I do think that being there and trying to achieve the job of listening and encouraging the kids is very important in the community. And also, you know, as at the beginning of the program, she mentioned the number of people that are living in poverty, you know. So if you can tackle those numbers from the very beginning, giving the kids a very good education and trying to build a better career for them, that's what I wanted to achieve, and that's why I decided to join and be a VISTA.
Thank you so much, Mike. That is so inspiring to hear your journey as to how you came here and what inspires you to serve the community that you are in. And can I ask, since you decided to come to D.C. for your service, what made you decide to serve here in D.C.?
Well, prior to this, I was doing a different AmeriCorps service in California, and that's very different from AmeriCorps VISTA. And AmeriCorps VISTA, AmeriCorps NCCC is a different program where you get to move to a different campus and you live in that campus and you do more hands-on community service. And back then I realized I really wanted to do something more capacity building, right? Creating a long living legacy, something where people can look up to and build on. And that's what I wanted to do, and I knew that since I was in college, I was passionate and interested about education and this idea of giving back to a community and building something that can last long. So I actually went and talked to someone about transferring to a VISTA program, and they told me that you should definitely look into VISTA, because if that's what you want to do, that's what you should do. And so I decided to apply, but specifically DC. It's just because I'm originally from New York City, so, but I want to go back to New York City. I wanted to have this idea of a big city, but not New York City.
All right, fair enough. So you chose the project based on the location, but also the area that you're working in.
It was location, it aligned what I wanted to do, and I wanted to live in the city.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. We're going to turn it over to our final panelist today. And thanks again to both Maya and Mike so far for sharing with us. We have Mr. Rafey Munir, who is a recent AmeriCorps VISTA alum. So Rafey, take it away. And Rafey is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or just outside of Philly, and served with Volunteer Houston, which is a large nonprofit in the Houston, Texas area.
Yeah, not so large, but it's definitely a nonprofit in the Houston area. My name is Rafey, like Ali said. If you're wondering in that picture which one is me, I'm the one in the middle. You can tell by the VISTA branding on my chest. My hair's a little bit longer now, so if you can visualize that, that's kind of what I look like. But I think, you know, the picture's kind of interesting. That's set in the Houston Convention Center. And the person to the right, so my left in the picture, is my former boss, with the big smile there on his face. And then to my right, in the picture and on the left, is the former director of the federal agency that manages national service programs, including AmeriCorps VISTA. And I think the reason why the picture is kind of interesting is that it's kind of a funny story. So we were at the convention center. Volunteer Houston was asked to help register volunteers and manage volunteers at this conference, which the conference was the Points of Light Conference on Volunteering and Service, which is a big conference, if you're not familiar, where a lot of nonprofits get together annually, and a lot of nonprofits that recruit and use AmeriCorps members. And so I was working at the volunteer booth, and my boss runs over, and he's like, Rafey, I need you to come out here right now. I need you to come out here right now. And he grabs me, and he's like, we need to go talk to somebody. And I'm like, well, I don't know who he wants me to go talk to, but this person must be somewhat important. And I know my boss wouldn't miss up on a good photo op, so I figured it would be an interesting person to meet. And so I met the woman to my right, and I had no idea who she was, but she was really interested in national service. And so we talked for a little while. She left, and then I asked my boss, I was like, who was that? And he said, well, that's Wendy Spencer. She runs AmeriCorps programs, and she's the head of the federal agency that does that. And so I think this picture might have helped me to get the job that I have now, in a way, which is working at that federal agency. But all that is to say that I think as a VISTA, one of the opportunities you have is to meet some interesting people. Being at that conference, I got to meet a lot of different leaders from the nonprofit space as well as private sector, because a lot of them are there. And I obviously got to meet Wendy Spencer, who was, like I said, was the former director of the federal agency that manages the program. My position title, like you can see there on the slide if you're looking at the webinar, was Volunteer Recruitment and Management Systems Specialist. And I was a member last year and am now an alumni. I think that sounds a lot more fancy than it is, maybe. Basically, what my job was to recruit users onto our volunteer connection platform and to make sure they had a good experience. And the volunteer connection platform was basically a website that allowed volunteers and nonprofits to connect and allowed volunteers to find volunteer opportunities in their area. Before I chose to join the VISTA program, I was working at a consulting company. So I graduated from school with a business degree, went and worked for a few years in Philly at a consulting company, and I was a project manager there and then left to join the program. And I think something interesting about the VISTA program versus even other national service opportunities, but versus other jobs in general as well, is that when I left, people would say, and even now people say, well, you chose to switch your career path or to completely change what you're doing, but I really don't see it that way. I think when you're a VISTA, you're kind of like a consultant to your organization. So whether you want to think about it as you're getting paid as a consultant or not, you're kind of like a full-time consultant at that organization because your job is to work on the infrastructure, the strategy, and the planning of that organization. So I didn't see it as a total career change. I just saw it as an opportunity to learn more rapidly and in a different environment. And my long-term goal is not to necessarily work in government forever, to work in nonprofit forever, or to work in the private sector. It's to work in all three and go back and forth and then figure out where I want to be longer term. And I thought that the VISTA program was a great way to do that. And in terms of if you're considering the program, a couple of things I would say. I really do think the program, like they say, gives you an opportunity to take ownership of an aspect of an organization at a relatively young age with relatively little experience. I'd never worked on systems before. I honestly didn't really know what I was doing when I got there, but I think you have the flexibility to try things and to figure things out, and that's an opportunity that in most jobs you won't get. If you're not already working, when you graduate from college and you get a job, you might realize that most jobs don't give you a chance to just try things. That's not normally how it works, unless you've got a really nice boss, a really good situation going. So if your goal is to try things, I think the program is a good way to do that and to gain experience. And I would broaden it even to people who aren't necessarily looking for a long-term career in public service or at a nonprofit. The way I thought about it was it's a low-risk way. Your risk is minimized because you're getting paid a living stipend and you get an education award. So I look at it as I could go and get an MBA, or I can just spend a year and make a little bit of money but not get in debt and go try something different and learn that way. And so that was my approach, and to me, that's the biggest benefit of the program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rafey. And before we turn it, well, as you've heard from all of our members here and alums, they've all had different experiences. And before we turn it over to just an open Q&A, I know we have Ann and Khadijah, who is in the room with us. They've been furiously answering all of your questions as quickly as they can. We have a couple other folks, our colleague Jessica, who's been also answering questions in the Q&A section and trying to get into the chat box as well. But I do want to just say I've seen a lot of the same questions, so I want to make sure I address them just in general. And one is about the requirements for education to join AmeriCorps VISTA. There are no educational requirements writ large. So I see a lot of people ask, do you need to have a bachelor's degree? Many projects do require that as a minimum. It's all on a case-by-case basis. But we have a lot of projects that don't. So, I mean, really it's about going into our application system, and we will type that into our chat box as well, the my.americorps.gov, and just searching by different areas of interest. So that's definitely something that, don't worry if you are like getting a degree, if you don't have a degree, that does not preclude you from service, absolutely not. Like I said, you have to be 18, and also that there is no upper age limit. The other question I keep seeing is people asking about specific skills. A lot of things that we talked about, there are a lot of different skills that you do get in the context of your service. And if you know, like, you know what, I want to do grant writing, that's something I'm really interested in, you can search for opportunities that do just fundraising and do just that sort of work. So although I'll be honest with you, as a VISTA who served a decade ago, any VISTA who can write grants, they love that. So even if your project is not explicitly in the grant writing world, for example, we do a lot of trainings throughout the course of VISTA service that we offer both in that pre-service training, but throughout the year as a VISTA, we do a lot of webinars just like this format, and we actually do offer a few college-accredited classes in nonprofit management and fundraising. So if that's something that, even if you don't happen to get it in the context of your training, we offer that throughout as part of the VISTA experience. So absolutely something to think about. I hear some of our members don't even know that that exists, so we'll talk afterwards. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to contribute and to kind of plug into an area that interests you. And we're about to go to the Q&A portion. We have about 15 minutes left, and I know folks have a lot of questions, but I want to let my panelists have one last just word of wisdom, last thing to say, and we'll start with Maya. Any last things you want to say to the audience who've been listening in all afternoon?
I will say two things. When you serve, don't be afraid to try new things, whether it's data analytics or public speaking for community outreach or grant writing. Like Rafey said, you get to learn a lot of new skills. And it's a great place to fail fast and figure it out. The second thing I will say is when you are doing capacity building work in nonprofits, there are systems that you may or may not like that might discourage you when you are in the position, and that has been my experience. But most of the time you'll be with an organization who identifies those problems and power dynamics of nonprofit giving and things like that, where you will have opportunities to positively affect that system. And so if that is your experience, just take it as a chance to grow and learn and impact the system. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Rafey, any last words of wisdom or final thoughts?
I guess what I would say, I didn't say this in my thing, I forgot to, but I think the experience varies pretty widely based on your position, because your supervisor is someone who's typically at the site there, at your service site with you. And so I would say definitely do your research. And if you don't know where you want to serve, take the opportunity to interview with a few different places and really figure out where you want to be, and think about, talk to those people and figure out at what stage your organization is at and what you want to do. If you want to go somewhere where you'll have a lot of structure, then maybe look for a larger organization. But if you want to go somewhere where you'll have to be a little more entrepreneurial, I think in a lot of cases you have to be entrepreneurial at a nonprofit, but if you want to really have to figure stuff out, find an organization where you'd have to do that. That's kind of what I did when I chose to go to Volunteer Houston. A big part of it was that they had just fired a bunch of staff. They had brought in a new CEO, and they'd done a complete restructuring like the year before. So I figured it'd be a good place to go and more or less get to have ownership of a big part of the organization. So think about that when you're trying to find something.
Nice. Thank you so much. And Mike?
I guess two things I would say is if you're graduating out of college and thinking of moving away from home and going somewhere else, I would say pick a fun city you want to live in. Pick somewhere you want to explore. We've been saying here a lot is try something new, and that will make the experience even more fun. And then I think the second thing is also be flexible and also know that it's not every day is going to be a dream. So you have to be ready to work with other people and knowing that not everything is going to be turned on time to you. So you have to be willing to work, be flexible. And I think that's one thing I want to stress out is this idea of flexibility. Be ready to be very flexible.
Very good advice. All right, thank you all so much. So we have some time left. Let's take some questions. And while we're waiting to hear from the phone, we'll have questions on the phone. We also are continuing to answer questions in the Q&A section. Take a minute to share your feedback on the poll and just let us know if this worked for you, this format. We're trying something new here. We haven't done these before, so we love your feedback if you enjoyed this. And one thing I did mention is that we are recording this, so you'll be able to come back to it if there's something you missed. If you had questions, you'll definitely be able to come back and hear from our presenters at a later date. So take a minute, share your feedback at the poll on the right side of the screen, and if you are interested in asking a question verbally, call in using the number on this slide at the very bottom, in the bottom right-hand corner, and press *1. If you want to, once again, ask a question electronically, use the Q&A feature located in the bottom right corner of the screen, and please ask all panelists. So without further ado, let's turn it over to our folks on the phone to see if we have any questions.
Allie, we did just get one to come through. I need just 1 second to listen to the name here.
Terrific.
Okay, and just to reiterate what Allie said, that is *1 and record your name if you'd like to ask a question over the phone. This first one comes from Brian. Your line is open.
All right, thank you so much. I just had a quick question. I've actually worked in government prior, and I worked with quite a few VISTAs in my past, which I think it's a great program. I primarily worked in the media and entertainment industry here in Los Angeles for several years, and my question was, which I wrote in too, is, you know, could you work at a university, for example? There's a lot of grants that are going out there for media and entertainment research, and could you go be a VISTA at one of these organizations that's doing a lot of deep social impact and social change-based research?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for your question, Brian. And the question was, you know, do we have these kinds of opportunities at universities specific to your area of interest? Yes, actually, we have a number of AmeriCorps VISTA programs that work directly with a lot of colleges and universities, depending on what the initiative is. It varies. For some colleges, I know of VISTAs that have helped develop the food pantry at a particular college and university, or they help with the outreach and social engagement and innovation piece that you just described. One of our larger sponsoring organizations is known as Campus Compact, which is a national organization that engages hundreds of college campuses across the country in service learning, and they're one of our biggest hosts of VISTAs across the country. So absolutely, yes, those opportunities exist, and so many that we don't even know all of them, but definitely check them out in the application portal and see what's available. Someone with your skill set, though, I will say we have a lot of media outreach type positions in VISTA. So I'll like full disclosure, I served in the early 2000s before Facebook and really before social media, so it was shocking to me when I started working at VISTA to go and meet other VISTA members who ran the social media accounts for their nonprofits and did all of the email marketing and did design work and designed all their outreach and collateral and recruitment. So yes, without a doubt, someone with your experience definitely would be welcomed, or with that area of interest. Do we have any other questions?
We do have a couple more queued up here. This next one comes from Tony Lee. Your line is open.
Hello, everyone. My question was for the background check. What are the, I guess, the negatives on your background check that would you wouldn't be eligible to work with AmeriCorps?
So AmeriCorps VISTA, and thanks so much for your question. This is Khadija. I'm Program Associate here at AmeriCorps VISTA, and I and my colleague Ann are actually the two-person team for the criminal history. So all AmeriCorps VISTAs have to be federally background checked. So we would provide the materials necessary to get VISTA members background checked, and once they get fingerprinted, we send those off to the FBI. We also have a number of ways that members can disclose their criminal history to us, and there are, of course, things that would bar you from service. So VISTA members work with vulnerable populations, and so things that would bar you from service are things that disrupt the livelihood of either a child or an elderly person, murder, and any sexually based conviction as well. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you very much for that answer.
Our next question.
Thank you, Khadija.
Next question comes from Latrice. Your line is open. Hi, Latrice. Please check your mute feature. Your line is open.
Okay. Hi, this is Latrice. I was wanting to know how far in advance that we would have to apply for any position on the website for AmeriCorps. Is it a time frame that you registration or application wise? They're going to start opening next month, and until which year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Thank you so much for your question. You can go and apply at any time. I think the average application time that I stated that from the day you apply to the day you start service, the average we see is about 2 to 3 months. However, I've seen people apply as late as a month before their service date and still get in and get all their paperwork and go. So honestly, it's really up to you. It's all about when you want to start service. One of the things I did mention, we have programs that start every month of the year, so we don't have any specific deadlines. It's a rolling application system, rolling deadlines. It's on a program-by-program basis. But I will say we have right now a high need for certain programs, especially those that start in July and August, and there are hundreds of them across the country that are still actively recruiting and looking for VISTA members. So if you have an area of interest, if you know, I want to serve in my hometown and I want to do this, I would check our portal. And I'm going to type that in the chat box again, the direct link to both our website as well as the My AmeriCorps portal. Now, our VISTA website will give you all the information you need to know about applying. All of the graphics from today's webinar will be on there, and we'll also re-record this and have that there. And then the portal is really like the job listings, like the real estate listings, if you would, for every particular AmeriCorps VISTA position. So I'll put those in the chat box momentarily. But thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question comes from Sophia Harrison. Your line is open.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Okay, thank you. I just had a question about relocation that was mentioned earlier. If you want to serve in an area that's not your hometown, how does that work as far as, I know that there was a mention of some availability for a stipend for relocation, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. So if you move more than 50 miles from your home to a new community for your service, AmeriCorps VISTA offers somewhat of a limited relocation travel assistance and a settling in allowance.
And okay, is there a percentage or a certain amount, like dollar amount, that they offer for relocation and settling in?
Yeah, so it really depends on where you're going and how far. So I'll use my services as an example. I am originally from New Hampshire, and I served in New Mexico. And because I was bringing my vehicle with me, I drove to get to my VISTA site, although they'll fly you if that's not something you're thinking of doing. And so I was given mileage and a little per diem for my trip, and then a settling in allowance. It all depends on the location. It's all based on the rate of where you serve on a county by county basis. So that we don't have specifics for that, but the settling in is usually supposed to be if you need to get a new furniture for your apartment, things like that.
And I just want to say one quick thing. This is Jessica. I work with the training unit. We typically get these questions a lot. Your relocation, the amount that you receive for travel is based on the mileage, and you're reimbursed mileage at a rate of 34 cents a mile. And the cap of relocation is at $1,000. Your settling in allowance that you would receive, as Ali mentioned, to get set up in a new place, that is $550. So $1,000 maximum for travel. It's based purely on mileage, and then the settling in allowance is $550.
Thank you, Jessica.
And we have one more question queued up. This one comes from Ariana. Your line is open.
Hello?
Hi, Ariana. You're live.
Yes. Hi. Yes. Hi. I just wanted to say that I think you guys are amazing. I think this stuff is great. I'm super excited about participating. I've created a profile, and I would like to start listening. So I'm on the website right now, and I don't mind relocating at all, but I just would like to try. I live in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan. I've got like 12 credits towards associate's degree. I'm actually looking to graduate with political science, although I have every aspect of dealing with well into poverty and poverty-stricken communities. That's like something I've always been wanting to do. And I just found out about this, that this whole AmeriCorps thing even existed like 6-7 months ago. And so I want to jump on it. So as I'm looking right now, like the questions, it says like advanced search, because I'm looking for positions right now. I was wondering, should I, because it gives you like options. It says AmeriCorps NCCC, AmeriCorps NCC team leaders, AmeriCorps state and national, and then it says AmeriCorps VISTA. And I clicked that because I'm like, well, that's probably, it's simple. And then I clicked on full or part-time. I, my highest level of education, I got some college, but I just put, high school diploma. And it says state. I put Michigan, but should I, leave that blank in the metro area? Should I leave that blank? Or would it probably be better for me to just put Michigan if that's where I'm trying to stay at? Because I want to do something so bad that I don't want to limit my, availability or options or anything like that.
Yeah. You want to say something, Mike? Yes. All right.
I think maybe you should leave it blank and go and read. They're going to give you a list of organizations and programs and things that they want to do to qualify with what you want with what you put in. And then maybe, go read, look at the organization, go on their website, check out their information, just do a lot of research on your own and take time to, before you press apply or submit the application, look at the organization and go on the website, read it, figure it out where you want, what you want, what's the most interesting to you, and then just apply to that and make a list of top 3 and apply to those. And then as you're gonna figure that out, you'll figure whether you want to be closer to home or not to, or go further away from home or not. But I would just suggest have it open, see what's out there, and narrow that down, not based on location or anything, but just on what you want to do, and you can maybe make a decision that way.
Okay, yeah, because I see it says service areas, so I'm clicking on things that I'm, would be interested in, like what areas that I would be, and skills. I don't have certificates for my skills that I feel, but I do feel like I have a calling for this. But I don't have any of the certifications in anything really. So I don't really know exactly what to put there. But it does leave me it has so many options here to click on. And I'm not really, I guess the only one I'm really going to do is teamwork, general skills, and writing and editing, because that's pretty much what I think I'm really good at. But I did just go ahead and search it. And so I've created a profile, and then it's saying, because it's saying no matches for what I listed. I don't know if I clicked too much. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I should just leave it as open as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say submit, cast as wide of a net as possible, and just be open to looking at different opportunities. Now, the other thing is, if you don't find a VISTA opportunity, that interests you, we can absolutely, I would say, keep checking back, because they're constantly adding new ones. So if you don't see something today, check back in a week. They're adding a lot more new ones. If you want to stay connected to different opportunities, just keep checking and, create that profile and keep going back. Absolutely. Because there is definitely something out there for you. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. Yes,
all right.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Let's see. I will say, and I'll just reiterate, when you do create an application, you can apply to up to 10 different listings with one application. So once you fill out all the information that the application requires, then you find your up to 10, and you could apply to all of those.
Okay.
So I think we're nearing the end of our time here. I want to see if we have any other questions on the phone.
And yes, Allie, we do have one final question here. Would you like to take that now? Okay.
Please, please.
If this question comes from Annalicia, your line is open.
All right, thank you. So my question is mainly about the application itself and particularly the motivational statement. It asks us to talk about like why we feel connected to whatever position that we're applying for. Yet if we're submitting multiple applications, I'm just wondering like how do we touch on all of those different ones, or like how do we connect with each of those positions if they're vastly different, you know? Or whether it's like this, because personally I have a lot of different interests and I've seen a few different VISTA positions that I'm interested in, but I don't know how to craft a motivational statement that speaks to each of those. I would have to like change my motivational statement, I think.
Sure. So I would be really general about the mission statement and talk specifically about why you're interested in national service in general, because the application can apply to all 3 programs. You can use the application to apply to 3 programs, but yes, I would say just keep it as general as possible and speak to your skill set and why they would lend themselves to any AmeriCorps program. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know, I worry about being too general because then I won't like be able to showcase exactly like why I was drawn to a specific position, but yeah, that's generally how it goes.
I would also say, for me at least, when I'm looking over VISTA applications, I'm looking for literally what motivates you, so not specifically why you're interested in like, you know, environment conservation or something like that, but like what's your passion behind it, and kind of like how your personal experiences have led you to wanting to serve, basically. So kind of think about it more broadly than a specific project.
And there are also those focus areas that you yourself can choose, right? Like they have the section that says writing or education or environmental issues or whatever. That's the opportunity for you to be more specific.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your feedback.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I know we ran a little over the hour. I know folks still have a lot of questions, and the good news is if you do have questions about the VISTA program and you didn't get them answered today, I will type in an inbox you can send your questions to. It goes right to me, Allie Snell, and my team, and we'll be sure to answer them in a timely manner because I know that folks still have a lot of questions. But my general advice is just do the research, look at all the different opportunities, see what works for you. And I do want to address, I've seen a lot of questions about how do you become a host site for an AmeriCorps VISTA? And the question, we can definitely answer that question right now in saying that if you go to AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA, we have a Partner with VISTA page. So you can check out the Partner with VISTA under AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA, and there's specific instructions as to how to become a host site for AmeriCorps VISTA. All right, so without further ado, we are going to wrap up the webinar. And if there are any other questions in the next few minutes, we'll be here to take them via chat. And lastly, I just want to make sure, is there anyone else on the phone?
We have no further questions on the phone line.
Terrific. Okay. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for participating. We really appreciated talking to you all. I'm going to put the email address that you can reach out to us with further questions if you have them. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening, and thanks for participating.